Okay. So thanks for joining today. My name is Lindsay Bertram, and I manage the Financial Wellness at Penn program. And thanks for joining us to learn how to create a debt management plan today. So before we get started, I just want to give you a brief overview of our program. So Financial Wellness at Penn is a program that intends to help students understand how to manage their personal finances, both now and in the future. You can read our full mission statement, which is on the screen. Given that our mission is education-based, we like to give a disclaimer up front and acknowledge that financial education does not solve all money struggles. Financial education can't fix poverty or repair damage caused by years of economic injustice. I am a Penn alum, and when I went to Penn, I was a first-generation low-income student. I budgeted weekly, I checked my credit score, credit report often, I did all the things I was supposed to do, and it didn't make me less poor, it just meant I was managing my money to the best of my ability. So that means what we can do with financial education is sort of set the record straight on all things finance, help you understand your financial options and how to choose between them, which is often the hardest part when it comes to personal finance. Our goal really is to provide you with education to empower you to make the decisions that are best for you when the time comes. So today, we're going to talk about how to create a debt management plan. And we like to start all of our presentations by outlining the goals of what we hope to achieve together. So today, our goals are to understand the emotional component of debt management. We'll identify responsible debt habits and then talk about debt repayment strategies and sort of how that can turn into a debt management plan. So we're going to start with a short discussion. I want to get a sense of the pre-existing feelings that you might have about debt before we discuss it today. So if you could just use the chat, let me know, what words do you associate with debt? What thoughts or feelings come to mind when you hear the word debt? You can submit as many answers as you'd like, and then we can discuss them. Loans, it's a good one. Stress. Yep, that's a typical one, I would say. Any other thoughts about bank, debt to income? Scam. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you for inputting that one. I haven't seen that one before. It's good. Great. So thank you for participating. I think generally we can see here, like, there are some terms that are, related to sort of the functionality of debt, so bank or loans, and then some words that get more at the feelings associated. So things like stress or scam, sort of your assessment of debt. And the reason why we like to ask this question when we do workshops about debt is because we know that it's common to harbor negative feelings about debt, and sometimes rightfully so. You might feel negatively about debt because of a bad familial experience with it, or feeling a lack of control in your own debt experiences, or just generally being unsure how to approach it. So our goal is to help you address some of those negative feelings and identify ways to feel more secure about debt and your relationship with debt throughout your life. Our emotions about things inevitably affect our behaviors, so it's important to address them intentionally. And we believe that the best way to address our negative debt feelings includes 3 steps, and that is becoming informed of your options, making decisions that reflect your needs and values, and then always creating a realistic repayment plan. These probably sound like common sense steps or, a way to approach this, and that's because they are. We like to think of personal finance as not being rocket science. A lot of times the concepts are really straightforward, and it's the implementation that can be a little complicated, or, it's hard to decide what choice is right or what choice is best. So we want to emphasize that this process of changing the negative to a positive is crucial because debt is not limited to student loans. Depending on where you are in your academic career or the program that you're in right now, whether you're an undergrad or graduate student, you may be taking on student loans, and that may be the primary way you're interacting with it. But debt is not limited to student loans. In your post-college life, it's likely that you'll use a credit card if you don't already. It's likely you'll buy a car at some point and use some sort of auto loan to finance that. It's likely that you'll buy a house one day and you'll interact with a mortgage. So debt can I mispronounced the word open. That's great. Debt can open a lot of doors for us to obtain the things we want and need. So developing positive emotions and responsible habits now can lead you to future successes in managing your debts later in life. And I also want to highlight that negative feelings about debt aren't limited to feelings of stress or anxiety, but sometimes guilt and shame also. There's a lot of public opinion and discourse about what is a good debt versus what is a bad debt. And I just want to take a moment to sort of address that discourse. We are not here to assign value to your debt choices. We're not going to objectively claim that a debt decision is inherently good or bad. It's not up for me to decide what's good or bad for you. You get to decide what's good, what's a good debt and what's a bad debt for you. Only you can judge your own circumstances and sort of best understand what leads you to want or need to take on a new loan or credit. And again, follow the common sense steps that we listed on the last slide. Know your options, find the option that aligns with your needs and values, and identify a realistic repayment plan. So generally speaking, a good debt is something that improves your financial position or net worth. So if you're taking on a debt to improve a skill or like, finance education, purchase an asset or meet some need that you have, that's great. It's probably good for you. You've made that determination that it's for the best in this circumstance. On the other hand, a bad debt may be one that's only a detriment to your financial position. You get to decide what are those debts that improve your financial position and the ones that hinder your financial position. You decide what's good and bad. So now that we've taken time to understand sort of the scope of our emotional relationship with debt, let's talk about types of debt and then we'll talk about some steps you can take to maintain a healthy relationship with debt. Generally speaking, debt can be classified into two main categories, and they are revolving and installment debt. Revolving debt is money that you continue to borrow and pay back in a cycle, sort of like a revolving door. The primary example of this type of debt is credit cards. So with a credit card, you're given a specific credit limit that you can borrow and repay over and over on a monthly basis. Installment debt, on the other hand, is some big lump sum that you borrow upfront and then you pay back in installments over time. So loans are the primary example of this, whether they're student loans, auto loans, mortgage, personal loans, whatever it may be, they tend to function with this sort of, you have these installments that you're paying back in regular intervals over time. And it's important to understand the different types of debt because the type of debt that you have may impact the way that you're billed for your repayments and how much your bill actually is, what goes into determining the cost that you end up owing. And knowing how those are billed will help you plan your debt repayment strategy, which is everything we're talking about today. So let's talk about some responsible debt habits. And I want to begin by explaining why being responsible with debt is important in the first place. Your responsible debt habits matter because of credit. So your debt habits are reflected in your credit score and credit reports. I'm not going to go super in depth about credit today, but if you have questions, feel free to send them in the chat and we can address them otherwise. But I just want to make sure you understand the basics about it and why these things fit together. So broadly speaking, credit is one way to quickly understand an individual's responsibility and financial preparedness. And when I use the term credit rather than credit score or credit report, I'm talking specifically about the way in which your habits are reflected to others. I will address that question at the end of this slide. So again, credit is one way to quickly understand an individual's responsibility and financial preparedness, and it's typically reflected with credit scores and credit reports. So your credit score is a number that an individual can look at to get a quick idea of how you handle your debt agreements. Your credit report, on the other hand, is a detailed accounting of your debt behaviors. It includes personal information, it includes lists of debts you've taken on, payment history, many things related to that payment history. So your score and report may be reviewed for a variety of reasons, including if you plan to borrow later, a lender may review your credit. If you're looking to rent an apartment, a landlord may request a credit check in order to understand how you follow through on your financial responsibilities. Basically, are you likely to pay your rent when it's due? Additionally, a potential employer may do a credit check just to get a general sense of your responsibility. It's important to stay aware of what others see when they review your credit history so that you know it's accurate and you know that they don't have misconceptions. You don't want someone to have the wrong impression about your trustworthiness. For this reason, experts recommend that you request a credit report on a regular basis to check for accurate reporting. You can request one credit report per year from the 3 credit reporting bureaus, which are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And so for that reason, it's recommended that you request one from each of the 3 credit bureaus every 4 months to maximize your free access. So like as an example, I request from Experian every January, I request from Equifax every May, and I request from TransUnion every September. So I split it up between the 4 months, or split it up to every 4 months, I should say. I also want to note that technically right now you can access a free credit report on a weekly basis through April 2022 because of the pandemic. It's unlikely that you will need to access it with that sort of frequency, but it's nice to know that the option is there should you need it. And anytime you want to request a credit report, you're going to do so through annualcreditreport.com. So the question in the chat says, can you request a credit report for debit cards? So the answer is no. And the reason why is because debit cards don't rely on you borrowing any type of money. Anytime you're using a debit card, you are using your own money that you've already earned. So there's not a lender that you're, I don't know, interacting with, I guess. So there's not any sort of borrowing that's happening. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some responsible debt habits. So number 1 is to be fully aware of the terms of any debts you agree to take on. And I suppose this is really like a before you actually take on the debt, this is how you should approach it. You want to make sure you compare offers so that you can decide what's best for you. Anytime you're considering using a new debt instrument, you should always understand all of the terms. How long will you be responsible for this debt? How much will it cost you, both on a monthly or, you know, whatever the billing cycle is? In what basis? How much will you be responsible for? And maybe also understanding over the long term how much you'll be responsible for. What's the interest rate? Are there any fees? So you'll want to look at things such as origination fees, which are sort of when you first take on the debt, is there some sort of upfront fee? Annual fees, are there any associated? And then sometimes there are early payment fees. So with some loans, if you pay them off before the end of the term, you might get charged a fee. And the reason for that is basically the lender is sort of counting on you to have this debt for an extended period of time where you'll continue to pay them interest. And so if you pay it off early before more interest can accrue, they sort of miss out on that money that they were expecting from you. So occasionally there will be early payment fees. Again, you want to understand all the terms associated with any debt that you're taking on, and then compare these terms between different options. This allows you the most control over what debts you're taking on and ensures that you fully understand what you're getting into before you actually sign on. Number 2 in our list of responsible debt habits is to know how a debt fits into your budget before you take it. So basically, don't borrow if you can't afford to pay it off within the given term, and only borrow what you need. This is important for a few reasons. You want to make sure you can maintain your other financial responsibilities along with this new one. This could involve making adjustments in your budget to accommodate for this new expense, but if you can make it work, you should feel empowered to take on the new debt. However, be careful that you're not signing up for something that's not sustainable over time. You want to make sure you keep your debts manageable. So when you're assessing if a new debt will work for you, you should consult your budget. Maybe you already have a budget. If you don't, we recommend you follow our 6-step budgeting process. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this right now because today's focus is not budgeting, but rather how you can fit debts into your budget. But we do want to just briefly talk through these 6 steps. So when you're starting a new budget, you almost always want to start by tracking your income and expenses for a month first. Basically, this gives you an idea of your baseline. So what are you currently earning and spending on a regular basis? After you've done that, reflect on your income and expenses to identify the key areas or budget categories in which you're allocating your money. So this could include things like rent, utilities, food, entertainment, shopping, savings, debt you'll want to include in there, things like personal supplies, toiletries, etc. After you know the categories, you'll want to identify all sources of income. And this could be in the form of a weekly or biweekly paycheck from a job. Depending on your financial aid, you might receive a student account refund on a monthly basis, so you can incorporate that into your budget. You might receive funding from family at times, etc. So you'll want to know all of your income sources. How much are you expecting? When do you expect them to arrive? And this can sort of help you plan out when you make purchases over time by knowing when you'll have what funds. Then you'll want to identify your expenses. So what do you typically spend in a given month? And this is where debt comes in. You want to make sure that when you add this new debt to your spending, that you're not spending more than you're earning overall. That's not going to be sustainable and is going to lead to a situation where you need to take on more debt to handle that, which isn't what you're looking for. So if you want, you can set boundaries for yourself ahead of time. Maybe you want to limit takeout to $100 per month. It's up to you if you want to set boundaries or not, but that can help you sort of limit your expenses to make room for things. It's completely up to you. Lastly, and I think this is the most important step in budgeting, but reflect regularly and adjust as needed. We like to say that budgeting is not a one-time occurrence. As time goes on, your financial needs will change. So your budget should reflect any financial changes that you experience. Now, once you add debt into your budget, can you maintain your basic needs? If yes, you should feel empowered to take on the debt if that's what you truly want. If not, you might consider if you need this debt right now. If it's absolutely crucial, you could pursue opportunities to reduce expenses or increase income. When you're assessing how this debt fits into your budget, it's also important to do a quick calculation to see what percentage of your expenses are debts. And this is because experts recommend limiting your monthly debt payments to about 36% of your expenses. Less is obviously better, but if you are on the higher end, you should aim for 36%. If at any point you need help calculating this, you can come talk to us, and we can take a look at your budget and debts together and help you figure that out. And then the last point I want to make about including debt in your budget is that we really hope that debt is not replacing savings. You should always be saving for a future financial uncertainty. If the pandemic has shown us anything, it's that we should always be prepared for the unexpected. So if you have to compromise savings to take on a debt, you might want to reconsider if that debt is really necessary at that moment in time. Now, to number 3 in our list of responsible debt habits. Always pay at least your minimum balance for all your debts every month and on time. This is by far the most important tip I can give you. Prioritize this above all else. And again, this is crucial because it will help you maintain good credit like we discussed before. So now that you know sort of the responsible debt habits you should strive for, how can you actually make a plan to tackle your debts? So the first step you should take is to make a list of all of your debts and their relevant details. And I have it's a like made up example on the screen of what debts could look like and what your list could look like. But basically your list should include any credit card debt, student loans, other loans you may have. For each debt listed in your sheet, you should list the total amount owed, the interest rate, minimum payment due each month. Depending on the terms of the debt you're engaging with, you may also add a column for fees, and some acknowledgement for when those fees occur and if you expect to incur them at a certain time. And if you're ever at a point where you're concerned about your debt levels, you may want to pause on taking on new debts for the time being until you can eliminate or at least reduce your current debt levels. That way you're not adding more debt to this plan that you're creating. Basically, what you want to learn from creating this list is the total amount that you owe each month. Once you know the total amount you owe monthly, one, you'll know if it's going to fit into your budget or not, and then how you want to tackle your debt when that comes up. So how you manage debts you have may depend on the type of debt you're looking at, like we mentioned before. And one of the main debts you may have after you graduate is federal loans. And I'm going to briefly talk about the two strategies that exist for paying for federal loans. And I want to be clear, this does not necessarily apply to private loans. So if you have private loans, the repayment options that exist may be a little bit different. So just keep that in mind. So basically, there are two main types of repayment plans for federal student loans. And the option that's best for you is based on your goals with paying your loans, as well as the resources that are available to you. So if you want to pay your loans off quickly and pay the smallest amount total toward your loans, you'll probably want to pursue what's called a time-driven repayment plan, like the 10-year standard repayment plan, or maybe the graduated repayment plans. And with the graduated one, basically your payments increase during the 10-year period as your income is expected to increase. Alternatively, if your primary goal is to maintain a low monthly payment, you may want to pursue what's called an income-driven repayment plan instead. So in a time-driven repayment plan, your monthly payment is based on your total debt that you will accrue. So the principal amount that you borrowed up front, as well as the interest that will accrue over the life of the loan. And it's divided evenly among 10 years of monthly payments. So your monthly payments are likely to be higher than payments in an income-driven repayment plan. And that's because in an income-driven plan, your payments are lower because they're based on a portion of your monthly income. So with the time-driven plan, again, you have a standard 10-year term, whereas in an income-driven plan, you have 20 to 25 years to pay off your loan, depending on the specific repayment plan you're in. So again, it's a lower monthly payment, but it lasts longer over time. So this may lead to you paying more in interest over time. You can pay your loan off before the term ends, and with federal student loans, there is no penalty like we discussed before for early payment. So having the flexibility of these options is great, but keep in mind that while income-driven plans will reduce your monthly payment, you may end up paying more over time because you're accruing interest for many more years than if you took the time-driven repayment approach. There is no right choice. You decide what your repayment objectives may be, taking into consideration what goals you have for your loan repayment, as well as the resources that are available to you at this time. And you can always change your repayment plan later on as well. Now, your federal student loan debt may be only one debt that you have when you leave Penn. So I'm going to outline two possible strategies for debt repayment if you have multiple debts, and why they may be beneficial for you. So as we've discussed previously, your decision should always be based on your financial goals and values. So identify what those are. Maybe you want to repay debt as quickly as you possibly can. You just want to get it out of your portfolio. You don't want to have to worry about it for longer than you need to. Maybe you want to pay the least amount over time. Maybe your biggest priority is to reduce the total amount you put toward this. Maybe you just want to have a manageable monthly payment, which is reasonable as well. You want to keep your monthly costs low so that you can maintain some standard of living that you're enjoying. So 2 common debt repayment strategies for folks who have multiple debts are debt avalanche and debt snowball, which we're about to discuss. I want to be clear before I explain them that in both of these strategies and in any way that you approach debt ever, you always want to make sure that you're paying the minimum balance on all of your debts, like the number 3 in our list of responsible debt habits. And then with these strategies, what you're doing is on top of the minimum payments, you're applying additional payments to a specific debt to sort of lower the total amount you owe based on your preferences. So in debt avalanche, you make your additional payments on the debt that has the highest interest rate until you pay it off. This can be beneficial because high interest rates plus a longer period of time will result in a larger cost to you over time. So basically with this method, you knock out the largest burdens and gradually move toward the smaller burdens. This method likely will involve paying off consumer debt first because credit cards typically have high interest rates compared to loans. This strategy can be good for individuals who want to reduce the total amount they spend toward paying off their debt over time because it's removing the opportunity for more interest to accrue. The other method is debt snowball. And with debt snowball, you make your additional payments to the debt with the lowest balance. So this allows you to have sort of small achievements over time, which, depending on how you approach your financial responsibilities, I think this one is more helpful if you really need that like psychological achievement. It helps you build momentum to work toward your larger debts, which I think can be really valuable depending on how you approach these things. It has a really great feel-good effect for that reason. So this strategy may be a good option for individuals who really value seeing clear progress over time. And you get to sort of check all the boxes off, like, all right, I cleared debt number 1, I'm moving on to debt number 2. It can feel good to have those accomplishments. And again, what you choose is up to you. Just make sure it aligns with your priorities. So that's really our presentation today. That's generally how you create a debt management plan and a few of the strategies that are available to you. Thanks for joining. And if you have questions, I encourage you to send them in the chat. We can chat for the rest of the time. There's also a link and a QR code to a feedback survey. I want to highly ask you to complete this. It really helps us, adapt these presentations for future audiences. So I would love to hear what you thought. But yeah, if you have questions, feel free to ask and we will address them. Thanks for coming.